All right, good morning, everybody. I'm watching people file into our virtual room, so I'll give you all a chance to sign on and get comfortable. My name is Janna Rudler. I'm the Southern Tier Field Consultant for the Preservation League of New York State, and I'm headquartered in Vestal, New York, right smack in the middle of the Southern Tier. I'm joined today by Kurt Riegel of Riegel Restoration. Hi, Kurt.
Hello.
Yeah. So Kurt's going to talk about windows, among other things. So, I invite you all to type in your questions in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and ask a verbal question. Now, I just want to reassure you all that you are in listen and view only mode, so nobody has audio or video capabilities at the moment. If you raise your hand, I can allow you to speak. So I can give you video capabilities if you wish to ask your question verbally. So you also have the opportunity to comment on other people's questions. This is meant to be a discussion. So I like to have all of these like-minded people in the room who have ideas and questions and various experiences behind them. So we can all make this a conversation as much as it can be in this forum. A little background on this particular session. This is something that we've called pop-up office hours over the years. So I travel around the Southern Tier of New York, and hosted by local organizations, I set up shop for a day and invite historic homeowners and property owners to come in and ask their questions about taking advantage of tax credits and about their home renovation projects. So that's what I'll be doing today, just in a slightly different forum. So not in person, but it's the best we can do under the circumstances. So I want to thank you all for joining me. I also would like to thank our funders. So the Preservation League's work in the Southern Tier is funded by the Corning Incorporated Foundation and the Community Foundation of Elmira, Corning, and Finger Lakes. So we want to thank them for supporting our work, especially in the Southern Tier of New York State. So a little bit about the Preservation League itself. If you're not familiar with us, the Preservation League is the statewide nonprofit working for historic preservation. So you might be familiar with your local historic preservation organizations. And we are the statewide nonprofit. So we work with those little groups, and I'll talk about that in a moment. It is our mission to invest in people and projects that champion the essential role of preservation and community revitalization, sustainable economic growth, and the protection of our historic buildings and landscapes. So we do various things to that end. Our focus areas include public policy. So we have 2 staff members who work at the state and national level to affect policy and make sure that historic preservation always has a seat at the table when we're talking about development and economic policies. We also give grants and loans. So the Preservation League partners with the New York State Council on the Arts to give grants 2 times a year for historic preservation planning projects. We also give out excellence awards. So we look around for nominations. We accept nominations for excellent historic preservation projects, and we recognize those with our awards once a year. We provide technical services and outreach. That's what I do mainly. So traveling around the Southern Tier, giving some educational presentations, partnering with professionals like Kurt here to bring information to people who need it. And I enjoy being hosted by local organizations and nonprofits. So keep this in mind. If you are active locally in historic preservation or in museums or libraries and you'd like to host me in your community, please get a hold of us. We also help protect threatened resources through our 7 to Save program. So this shines a light on 7 deserving buildings or classes of buildings that need to be saved statewide. And this 7 to Save program brings enhanced technical support for saving these buildings, and it also raises public awareness of the needs of these deserving historic properties. And last but not least, we work with our local preservation colleagues. So like Historic Ithaca, Historic Elmira, the Preservation Association of the Southern Tier, your local preservation organizations, we help bolster their programming, and they help us gain access statewide to communities so that we can spread information and resources about historic preservation. So let's talk a little bit about historic tax credits, because historic tax credits are the #1 tool that private property owners have to help them finance their historic preservation projects in their own buildings. Today, we're talking specifically about the New York State Historic Homeowner Rehabilitation Credits. So this is something that's available to owners of historic homes, and it provides 20% in tax credits to help 20% of your expenditures on approved home projects as a tax credit. So how this is different than a deduction is that this is a dollar-for-dollar reduction in your tax burden to New York State. So when you would get 20% back, either in the form of a credit, or if you reach certain income thresholds, this may come back to you as an actual tax return check. So don't worry if you don't typically owe a lot in taxes, because this would come back to you in the form of a tax return. So how does one qualify for historic tax credits? Well, your building or your home needs to be listed either individually or as part of a historic district. So listed on the National Register of Historic Places, either individually, as I said, or part of a district. So you can find this out by asking us, asking the State Historic Preservation Office, or maybe you already know whether your house is located in a historic district. This is not the same as a local district, so you want to be careful with that. But some local districts are eligible too for tax credits. It depends on how your local government is set up. If you are part of a certified local government, then oftentimes your local district would qualify as well. So what kind of projects can you expect to get approved? These projects, first of all, have to be approved by the State Historic Preservation Office. So one of the main points of my presentation today, and one of the main things I want you to take away with you, is that you have to start planning for your project. Make a wish list. We've all got time right now where not all of us, but some of us are working from home these days, and we get to take a look at our houses and start dreaming of some of the projects we'd like to do around the house. Make a wish list and start prioritizing what projects need to be done. Do you need a new roof? Well, that should come first. So, and then start prioritizing a little bit. These projects, before you start on them, in order to qualify for tax credits, need to be pre-approved by the Historic Preservation Office. So it's good to start with a wish list. Start dreaming and then go from there. Any work that you do on your house in order to qualify for tax credits needs to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitating historic properties. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. There is a wonderful guide from the National Park Service that can help walk you through this and see if your work is going to qualify and see how you can get your work to qualify for tax credits. And of course, you have to meet all your local ordinances and zoning as well. So you want to be in contact with your local municipality as you move forward. So I want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. You can do this anytime. You won't be interrupting me. I'll get to your questions when I see them. But feel free to ask questions as I go along. So some of the qualifying expenses for historic tax credits, it's almost everything to do with the shell of the house itself. Imagine picking up your house and turning it upside down, shaking it. Whatever doesn't fall out oftentimes is a qualified expense. So we're talking about material costs, the materials for your project, labor costs, HVAC systems too qualify, as well as green energy, so solar panels. And there are some restrictions for that, but solar panels, yes, do qualify under certain circumstances. So geothermal heating systems. So if you want to upgrade and become a little more green with your building, these expenses can qualify as well. If some of your historic features are rotted or falling off your house or missing altogether, and you want to bring those back, that's something that qualifies as well. As long as there's some documentation that those things were there to begin with. So if you want to add some massive columns to your front porch and those weren't there to begin with, no, it's probably not going to fly. So masonry, you can see the list here. Some things are surprising, you know, that qualify. You can redo your bathroom or your kitchen. Appliances do not qualify, but the work does, the renovations do. So some non-qualifying expenses, and I have a little photograph to show you. Fences, they don't qualify, nor landscaping, paving, walkways, things like that. Things that aren't physically attached to your house. Garages, outbuildings, I'm afraid don't qualify. There may be some exceptions for barns, so that's something to look into with the State Historic Preservation Office. They have a program for historic barns. That program is always changing, and you know, there was a program years ago that has phased out. So if you have a historic barn, that would be something to talk with the State Historic Preservation Office about. And at the end of my presentation, after my presentation, I'll be sending you all a list of helpful links and contacts at the State Historic Preservation Office. So you don't just need to call a number and wonder who the heck you're going to talk to. I'll let you know who your regional representative is, depending on where you're located in the state, and you can call that person. Yes, Kurt, I see you have something to say.
I have a question, actually.
Oh, sure.
With this topic we're talking about, if you're in a historic district, state or national, and you're qualifying for this eligibility, if your garage or your outbuilding is a contributing factor to that district, then is it eligible to use the credit towards that building?
Really excellent question. And speaking entirely from the gut, I would say it should be, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is. So, you know, that's a good thing to ask the State Historic Preservation Office about, honestly. There's some carriage houses out there that were, you know, fully functioning parts of that historic property. They may be original to the property. Yeah, and it seems like they should qualify. But that would be a question for SHPO. They can help you with that. Excellent question, though. So some more non-qualifying expenses, things that aren't attached to the house, like I said. So remote lighting, a light pole at the end of your driveway, not so much, but the lighting on your front porch that's part of the house, as long as it meets the Secretary of the Interior standards, that would qualify too. Sweat equity too. I wanted to point out that if you do work on your own house and you try to qualify that with dollars, that doesn't qualify. That's your sweat equity. That's your investment in the project itself. So how can these expenses be taken? So a minimum of $5,000 has to occur in expenses in order to be eligible to take advantage of the tax credits. But you don't have to spend all $5,000 in 1 year. Now, on historic homes, it's pretty easy to come up with $5,000 of work to do at any given time, I'm sure. But if you want to spread this out over the course of years, what you can do is get your projects pre-qualified and then embark on them. And once you hit that $5,000 mark, you can fill out part 3 of your application and take your tax credits in the following tax year. So 5% of your expenditures need to be on the exterior of your house. This is for public benefit. So this is a public program, and we want the public to benefit somewhat from this program. So exterior work that adds beautification to your property, 5% of your expenditures need to go into that. You can paint, you can do whatever needs to be done on the outside as long as it qualifies. So there is a limit to the tax credits that you can take, $50,000 limit. That's based on $250,000 of work. That's not a lifetime limit, that's a one-time limit. So over your own life and the life of your house, you can keep on taking these tax credits, and there's really no limit to that. So there are some helpful resources to get you started with your project and to get you thinking about what might meet the standards of the Secretary of the Interior. So when you're thinking about work to do on your house, it's helpful to take a look at the preservation briefs that are put out by the National Park Service, and I'll provide you a clickable list to those. And then the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. Now that's a 240-page guide, but only a portion of it applies to the work you'll be doing as a historic homeowner. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. So the National Park Service's preservation briefs provide guidance for specific kinds of projects on your historic property and can give you some insight on what kind of work is required and things to do and things to avoid with your property. As you look down this list, you can see all kinds of things from masonry to windows and stained glass, anything you can think of with a historic building. So these guides are really handy. They're brief, they're meant for the public to read, so they're not, particularly heavy reading. And these publications are available for free, downloaded right from the National Park Service website. The Secretary of the Interior Standards is the Bible for historic preservation. And you'll see that there are guidelines for 4 kinds of treatments of historic properties: preserving, rehabilitating, restoring, and reconstructing. And as a historic homeowner, the things that you'll be doing to your house fall under rehabilitating. So that's the section of the guide you're going to want to look at. When you download this guide off of the website, and there is a link right on my screen where you can find this guide, the rehabilitation part starts on page 75 and it goes to about page 162 or something like that. So it's just a section of this, and it goes material by material, treatment by treatment. It gives you recommendations and then things to avoid. So it's really simple. Think about your project, find it in the guide, and start thinking about ways that you can get this work done or do the work yourself. So applying for tax credits is a little bit simpler process than it used to be. So the State Historic Preservation Office updated their application process late last year. So if you're not familiar with it lately, take a look at it on the website, and I'll provide that link later in the program. The application is in 3 parts. Part 1 of the application helps determine your eligibility. So the eligibility of your house and your eligibility as a New York State taxpayer. You have to be living in your house, for one thing. This is for owner-occupied properties. There are different tax credit programs for income-producing properties, and we'll talk a little bit about how you can learn more about those programs later. So this is a 3-step application process. You start obviously with part 1. There are some fees involved, although if you reach certain income thresholds, these fees may not apply. So part 1 of the application is 2 pages. It's not too bad. You answer some basic questions about yourself and your property, and this helps determine your eligibility. So like I mentioned before, your house needs to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places or a contributing building in a National Register district. Some houses in local historic districts may be eligible, depending on your certified local government or not. Part 2 is where you lay out your wish list and start looking at the work you want to do to your house. You need to provide photographs, and the application, it may have been on page, no it wasn't. There is a guide to how to take effective photographs of your projects. So from photo angle and the kinds of photos they're looking for. But these photos are important because you probably won't be getting a visit from the State Historic Preservation Office. They'll be depending on these photographs to help evaluate your project. So you lay out the work that you're proposing to do. You talk about the existing condition of your house and the estimated cost. This is an estimate, so get some bids, get some estimates, but it doesn't have to be exact. These things can change as your project progresses. And there is an addendum process. So if anything about your project changes as you go along, you can always file an addendum sheet. Now, when you're thinking about the work that you want to do to your house, you may not be really wanting to do the work yourself. You want to look for a contractor to do it. A couple ways to go about that. First of all, I want to point out that we don't provide references necessarily for contractors to do the work. We do have a list of consultants, however. So if you want to check out the Preservation League's list of consultants, these are people, architects and engineers primarily, that have done work on our funded projects. And again, we don't fund the brick and mortar part of the project, we fund the studies. So these are folks who have completed these studies and done them well, who we can recommend. They may be able to recommend contractors to do the work. So find somebody local to you and talk to them. But one of the best ways to find a qualified contractor is to keep an eye out in your neighborhood on projects that are going on. If you see a house that is particularly well done in your historic district, or if there's work going on, walk up, knock on the door, not right now, social distancing, but you know, or wear a mask, whatever. But talk to people in your neighborhood that have had this work done on their houses and see who did it. I have a sign on my slide here. This is not meant to be a recommendation or endorsement for Robert Ilg, but this sign was out front of the Tioga County Historical Society in Owego, New York. And well, they were having some work done on their building. Their contractor put out this sign. This is a useful way to find a contractor who might suit your needs. So look around your neighborhood, ask questions of other property owners, and see who they recommend. Most people are really forthcoming about their projects, and they like to talk about their houses and what they've done. So it never hurts to ask. Once you find a contractor that you'd like to talk to, ask for references, make sure that people are happy with their work, especially where it pertains to historic buildings. You might find a contractor who's excellent and has a great reputation in your town, but doesn't have much of a clue about historic buildings. So you need to be careful about that. They may say that they can do the work, but you need to see the references. Refer to the Secretary of the Interior's standards. Say, hey, you know, this work needs to fall within these standards. If they poo-poo that idea, move on. You know, you want to make sure that this is somebody who's going to do the project the right way, the way that it needs to be done for you to take your tax credits. So part 3 is the final part of your application that you fill out once your work is complete, and this is how you take your tax credit. So in thinking about your projects and in planning, you want to plan to file part 3 on or about October 1st in order to take your tax credits for that tax year. If if the work's not complete until December and you file it, it's no big deal. You just may have to wait an additional year to take your tax credits. So you want to start planning early. This is the time of year to start making your wish list for your home projects. Start filling out part 1 of your application and get it submitted. And then grab part 2, which is your project planning page, and start laying out your projects. And the earlier you start planning, the better. You definitely do not want to embark on this work until you get it approved by the State Historic Preservation Office if you want to get your tax credits. So let's check and see if we have any questions yet. No questions. I'm either doing a great job or you all have fallen asleep. But so there are a number of ways that you can stay in contact with us at the Preservation League. If you'd like to talk to me about these pop-up office hours that I do around the Southern Tier, you can get a hold of me at jrudler@preservenys.org. Please follow us on social media. Please share our events widely and our posts widely. We really appreciate that. Helps get the word out about what we're doing statewide. Are there any questions before I hand this over to Kurt to talk about historic windows? Yeah, so I see we have a hand raised. And I'm going to figure out how to let her answer her question. Here we go. Well, oh, here we go. Sorry about this. I feel like I'm sitting in the cockpit of a jet just learning to fly today. This is my first Zoom session. And even though I've practiced, it takes a little. So Linda, if you would like to speak your question, go right ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. My question is, I think you said that the home has to be in a national historic district.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I know my home is in a historic district, but I don't know if it's national. Is there some other kind of, like a local historical district? Is that?
Yeah, so there are a couple different kinds. There are local designated districts of, whether districts or landmarks, and there's the National Register. You can check whether your property is in a national register district by asking your.
You froze.
Oh,
Uh,
oh no.
I don't know. I didn't hear what you just said the last minute because it froze.
Okay, that's fine. I'll repeat that. So you can get a hold of your representative at the State Historic Preservation Office and ask them if you're located in a historic district. There's also a cultural resource information system online where you can search. There's a bit of a learning curve involved in using that system, but you can certainly Google it. It's fun to use once you get the hang of it. If you're not into that, you can ask us to search for you, or you can ask your representative at the State Historic Preservation Office. Can I ask, what county are you located in, Linda?
Chautauqua. And we have, I don't know if you're familiar with Jamestown Renaissance Court.
Yeah, yes we are.
Okay, so I would think they would be able to answer that question.
Yep, they probably would. So yeah, your local colleagues there should be able to answer that question for you. If you don't get anywhere with them, you can always email me and I can get back to you and show you the map, actually, of your district.
Yeah, I've seen that, but like I said, I don't know if it's national or local. I have a feeling it's just local. I don't know, but.
Oftentimes they're both. Municipalities will designate their local districts and then get them listed nationally so that their people can take advantage of historic tax credits. So, sometimes the two go hand in hand, but not always. So it is good to check. But
okay. I appreciate that. And I thought I had 3 more questions, but I can't find them now. I took notes.
Oh, well,
That's okay.
That's okay. Feel free to raise your hand when you, when you think of them, or you can type them in the chat box, either way.
Did the chat come up?
The chat should be in the lower right hand of your screen. I
tried and you didn't respond, so I thought maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't.
That's all.
There it is. I see your questions. Okay, so here's a good question. Do windows count as exterior work? Yes, I believe so. Kurt, what do you think about that?
Yes, they
exterior?
do.
Yeah, great. Yeah, because you can see them from the exterior, and windows are really important to the look of your house. So yeah, they do. Oh, and I see you already answered that question. Thank you, Kurt.
No problem.
Yeah. All right. So yes, exactly. So what Kurt pointed out in the chat, that the New York State Historic Preservation Office Cultural Resource Information System is the platform you use online to check that out. You can Google that. There are various search features in there. You can search by municipality. You can zoom in on a map. You can see those districts drawn out. And there are a number of filters and layers that you can click on to show your local districts, your national districts, the specific buildings that are listed or that are eligible or ineligible. It's really fun to get into if you want to try that. If you don't, you can ask one of us and we'd be happy at the Preservation League to help you with that. So who and where is the Secretary of Interior location? That's a good question. So at the end of my presentation, I'll be emailing all of you a copy of my slides, and there are links here and there. There's the link on your screen of the Secretary of the Interior's standards. Don't feel the need to write it down. It's kind of long. I will send it to you and you'll be able to click right on it and find those standards. They were updated in 2017. So if in the past you've looked at them and you maybe even have a hard copy, check them out again. They've been updated. And these updates, I just want to point out that the National Park Service and the State Historic Preservation Office have updated the standards and they've updated the application. And they've made them easier to use and a little more user-friendly. So, if you don't have experience lately with those things, please check them out. All right. So now that I've found the chat box and I can answer your questions, please feel free to type in any questions that you may have. In the meantime, I'm going to hand it over to Kurt. We're going to talk a little bit about windows on historic buildings, why they're important, some of the work that you can do as a homeowner to maintain your windows, and and we'd be happy to field your questions. So, hey, Kurt.
Hey, well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Hello, everybody. I don't have a PowerPoint prepared for you all to look at. However, I am going to try to field some questions that you all might have, and we'll work that way. So windows are a huge character-defining feature of your property. Windows are really the eye of your building. And so if you lose your windows, you lose your building's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
They're extremely important to keep. And there are a lot of misconceptions about windows out there. People have the notion that old windows cannot be energy efficient. They have to be replaced in order to save heat. And that is actually not true. An original window, properly maintained with a tight fitting storm window, is equally energy efficient to a replacement vinyl window. And there are numerous studies to back that up. Does anybody have any questions about windows at all? Or?
All right, so I can tell you some questions that I've gotten about windows, maybe you can help me with. So
Okay.
One of the misconceptions, as you pointed out, about historic windows are that they're drafty. Are there adjustments that you can make to old windows to make them more efficient?
Yes. So old windows, one, you can do a storm window. There are many different kinds of storm windows you can use. You can use a traditional wooden storm window. You could also use a more modern kind of triple track aluminum. There's also interior storm windows, which are gasket that hold in the interior. And the interior ones work really well because they don't hide the exterior of your window from the streetscape. You can also do weather stripping, and there are lots of ways of weather stripping also. One way is where they actually put bronze weather stripping on your sash that interlocks with your jamb. So
it's important to point out too that these are all qualifying expenses for historic tax credits. So if you want to do weatherproofing on your house to make it more efficient, so you can get 20% back on your investment. And storm windows can be really beautiful. So there are custom-made exterior storm windows that go right along with the historic look of your house. There are also the more modern aluminum storm windows that help improve efficiency. So there's a number of options, and like you pointed out, interior storms, which are really handy, easy to install, and can be custom made to your windows.
And also from a cost-effective measure, I actually made some very simple DIY storm windows one time for somebody that anybody can make. They were just strips of wood that were screwed together, and then that plastic that you put over top of the form and put a heat gun to it, a hair dryer. It was very simple, very quick and cheap, and it really helped the cost for efficiency.
Oh, that's really good to know.
Can make those.
Wow, we should do a workshop sometime. You can show us how to make them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so any other questions about windows? What do you want to know about your windows? How to maintain them? So something I thought I would ask you about is painting windows. So, historic windows are wood clad. They are not meant to be maintenance free. How important is painting your windows to maintaining them?
Yeah, so paint is extremely important for your window. I guess the first thing so if you are a homeowner and you want to assess your window to see what needs to be done, you want to first look at the entire window. Before any painting takes place, you want to make sure that the glazing, which is the putty that holds the glass into the window sash, you want to make sure that that putty is sealed all the way around and not loose and falling out. If the putty is loose and falling out, then you want to carefully remove anything that is loose and then re-putty around the window. Once the putty is on and good, depending on the brand you use, they all have different cure times. So you have to wait for that putty to cure before you paint. And then once it's cured, then you can paint. And you want to use a good quality paint for your windows. And you want to make sure that the paint laps onto the glass. So you don't want to use blue painter's tape and mask off glass when you paint, because if you do that and you pull the tape off, then the paint's not going to get a good seal onto the glass, and then water is going to get in there and get behind that paint, and it's going to peel, and you're going to have issues.
Wow.
So your paint is not just a decorative approach, it's actually a sealing mechanism to protect your window and your house from the elements.
Wow, that's really good to know. I would not have thought that. I would have taped everything off and done it wrong. So I'm glad I asked. Wow. All right, so what about old windows that are hard to open and close and that don't stay open or don't open at all? What can you do about that?
Yeah, so every window is different. It's hard to give a pure answer to that question. Windows more or less before 1850 don't have weights or pulleys. They usually are single hung, meaning the upper sash will not come down typically. Only the lower sash moves. If they're stuck, I mean, you can take a window zipper, which is
Good thing Kurt's in his workshop right now. He has things right at hand to show it. Wow.
This amazing tool here. This is a window zipper, and this acts like a knife, and you can take this and go right along the edge of the sash and where it meets the stop, which is the strip of wood that holds the sash into place into the jamb. If you cut that paint line that's usually stopping the window from opening, that'll help the window open and close. Sometimes it's more difficult. Sometimes it's got lots of years of paint on the actual inside of the jamb. When you paint your window also, it's not just painting the sash. People sometimes paint the interior track of their jamb, which is the side of the frame that the window rides up and down. You never paint that. You want that always to be bare wood. If you paint that, then it gets gummy and windows don't open and close properly.
Oh, wow.
So you want to remove that paint off of that jamb track. And if it's extremely stuck, then this might not work for the application. You might have to take your stops off, which are the strips of wood holding your sash in. Remove those carefully and take your sash out, then really get in there and scrape with a pull scraper. Something like this. And get all of that paint free and loose, and then reinstall it all back in again, and then it should be good. That's for pre-1850. After that, with Victorian, you get ropes and pulleys. It's the same method. However, there's the added benefit of having a rope and a weight to keep your window open and closed instead of just sticking a stick in there.
Yeah.
So you can replace your ropes, make sure your pulleys work really well.
Yeah, and those weights, I mean, if the ropes break, the weights are still in there. They're just not attached to anything. Yeah. So, and you can take that apart and get in there and, Yep.
Right. If you take your interior stop, the interior strip of wood that's holding the window in place, you take that off, you typically will find a weight pocket behind there, which is where the wood of the jamb is cut out, and there's one screw holding it. Take that one screw out and you can access the weight pocket. You can pull the weight out of there, tie a rope onto it, and rope your windows.
Wow. Wow. So we have a question for you, Kurt. Do you have any kind of handout of suggested regular maintenance steps?
I do. I also want to point out that there have been several publications on windows put out in the recent past. One of the first ones is this one. And this is put out by John Leake. And this talks in detail about window maintenance and restoration. Another book put out by Steve Jordan is this one.
Oh, yeah.
Steve Steve Jordan is a New York State native from the Rochester area. And once again, it's in very good detail about maintenance, restoration, talks about sash, jam, sills, weather stripping, storm windows, you name it. You can see it's very lengthy. So
Everything you ever wanted to know about windows.
yes,
There you go.
these are both available online on Amazon. So
Excellent. And I want to point out also, Beth, that there are the National Park Service preservation briefs. So window maintenance is one of those. So you will be getting that clickable list of preservation links in your email, and you can read all about it there. We have another question. So for your window weights, what kind of rope would you use? Is this a cotton clothesline, or is there a special kind of rope?
So you want to use 100% cotton rope. It's usually just called sash rope when you go to the hardware store. Looks like this. You don't want to use anything synthetic. Cotton rope is really what you want to use because cotton does not stretch. If you use nylon or polyester rope, over time, that'll stretch out. And when it stretches, your weights will no longer be hanging. They'll be sitting on the bottom of the jam, and it won't be effective.
Right. Yeah, good question. All right, so we've got some recommended reading and some window maintenance tips. Are there any other questions before we wrap things up for you all this morning? So I'll give you a moment to type them in or to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a verbal question. I'll do my best to respond.
Going back to the painting, you also want to make sure that before you paint your windows that you scrape off all of the loose paint that is flaking. You don't want to paint over top of loose, flaky paint. Otherwise, it'll just flake off again. And there's a difference between restoration and maintenance. And so for a restoration of a window sash and a jam, you remove all of the paint down to bare wood, and then treat the sash the proper way with primer, condition the rabbits, and then repaint. But for a maintenance aspect, that might not be needed for all cases. So you can just scrape the loose that is falling off, new coat of paint, and it'll be good.
Great. All right. So if a homeowner does not feel like doing this themselves, or they feel intimidated by it, which once you've gotten a hold of some of those recommended readings, then that should take a lot of the intimidation factor out of maintaining your own windows. But can they call you, Kurt? Will you come to people's houses, fix their windows for them?
I will.
Is that
they can call me and I can show up to their house. I can assess them and I can help them or do the work.
Great. Good to know. Good to know we have help available.
And my email is right here on the page currently.
Yes, indeed. Yep. And that email is there for a reason. So, if you have further questions pertaining specifically to Windows, but like I said, you'll get a follow-up email after this presentation, and I'll include some of those recommended readings that Kurt showed you. I have another question here. So Linda asks, my house has vinyl siding and I want to have it removed. I want the original clapboard that was there. Am I crazy to do this? What do you think?
Not crazy at all. That's a very good question. And it's a question that I wish that most people would pose. Vinyl siding is not a recommended exterior cladding material. It's a quick, cheap material, and it's one that is maintenance free. However, original clapboard is always much better for the building. Vinyl siding has a tendency to trap moisture and hide problems. So if there is an issue with water or moisture with your building, you're not going to see that issue, and it's going to get worse and worse. When you have clapboard, it doesn't trap moisture, and then if an issue arises, you can clearly see that issue and then get to it to prevent it from getting further down the road. So yes, I would recommend removing your vinyl siding and exposing your original clapboard. And the tricky thing is once you remove that vinyl siding, you're not sure what you're going to find because you're not sure what has been hiding behind that stuff all these years. So you want to expose it and then be prepared to have other costs and other things to be fixed.
Yeah, certainly. And it's probably a good idea too. Just wanted to point out that I live in a house that is clad in vinyl siding. I'd love to know what's underneath because it is an older house. But folks try, well-meaning people say, well, you should power wash your siding. And no, power washing vinyl siding just introduces moisture to where you don't want it, which is underneath that siding. So, get yourself a scrub brush and get out there and scrub your vinyl siding if you have to. But what I do every summer, lots of fun. So it may be zero maintenance, but it's not really. Nothing's really zero maintenance. And that's something else that, is important to understand about any house, whether your house is historic or not. You're living in this house, it deserves and it requires some loving care. Older houses, a little bit more loving care, but it's an investment in time and effort that will pay off over the years. Like you said, covering up problems is never a good idea. You want to find them and deal with them as soon as you can.
Yeah.
And, and a lot of these problems, structural problems or rot problems, are eligible expenses for tax credits. So you can get help paying for these things through tax credits. So I have
an example of a vinyl siding. I have a client who vinyl sided their house and covered their windows, trims, and their window sills with coil stock, which is aluminum.
Mm-hmm.
And that channeled water into the window, and it rotted the window sill out, which was not, you couldn't see it. And the window was in really bad shape, the sash. So when I went to go pull the window is here. And you can see it's all missing and rotting on the bottom. And it's missing chunks. And it's temporarily braced with chunks of wood now.
Mm-hmm.
This is all because of vinyl siding. Vinyl siding contributed to this failure. So you want to remove this stuff because it is really bad for your building.
Yeah. So, and Linda, continues, she said that, everybody's telling her not to remove her vinyl siding, that maybe she doesn't want to know what's underneath and that she's pretty sure it'll need repairs. Is there a way to do like a test section, maybe go and remove some of the siding just to take a look underneath and decide whether you want to deal with it or not?
Yeah, you could always do one side at a time of a building.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on what your building is like, if it's four-sided, do one side, but if it's multifaceted, multi-sided, then pick one side and start small and be excited.
It's an adventure. Honestly, old houses are an adventure all the time. And, an investment like that, I feel like it would be worth it. I'm trying to put myself in her shoes. I kind of am, in a way, like I said. Got siding on my house, love to know what's underneath, but it takes planning, so plan out that project. Find yourself a contractor or somebody to help you if you don't want to do it yourself. Fill out part 1 of your tax credit application, see if you can get some help with the expenses and go for it. It's all in the name of historic preservation. And I think you'd be very pleased, with what's underneath, once you get that work underway. So.
And the same with windows. With windows, if you currently have a vinyl windows have a lifespan of 20 to 25 years until they fail. And once a vinyl window fails, they're not built and designed to be repairable. You can't repair that. So it has to be once again replaced. And that's for the life of the building now, for so on and so on. While a nice wooden sash window is designed to be repaired. So after 20 years, when things fail in it, you can simply repair it and keep the life of that window for that building for literally hundreds of years. Mm. And vinyl windows also can be replaced with wooden sash windows.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Wow. So you can rip out your vinyl windows and put back in wooden sash.
Oh, that's good news. That is good news. I've seen vinyl windows fail. I've had it happen to me. In a previous life, I had a house that we replaced all the windows with vinyl, and 10 years in, I had panes that were cloudy. The corners of the windows were separating. like you said, I mean, vinyl windows are not meant to expand and contract with the weather like wood is. So really can't beat those wood clad windows. So Linda continues that she'd like to contact us. Her home's in Jamestown and built in 1915. I bet it's beautiful. Yeah.
I love Lucy territory.
Yeah, yes, it is. It's a beautiful town. I got the chance to go to Jamestown for the first time late last year. We had our 7 to Save exhibit making its way across the state. So this was a photographic exhibit of our current 7 to Save list, or the one that's going out now with the new one. And Jamestown hosted that exhibit for a while for us. So it was really neat to see some of their historic resources out there. They got some beautiful neighborhoods and buildings. Their historic neighborhoods are ever expanding. They've actually gotten a few different grants from the Preservation League to expand their historic districts and to nominate new ones. So it's exciting what's going on out there in Jamestown. So this is really great. It's great to hear from you, Linda. This is really fun and interesting, and I'll be interested to see what happens with your house as you go forward. All right, so it looks like that may be all the questions. I'll give you all one last chance to ask your questions in this forum. If you have any additional questions once the webinar has ended, you can certainly email either me or Kurt, depending on the nature of your question, and we'll make sure it gets to the right place. And you'll be receiving a follow-up packet from me, which includes these slides here so that you can look through them again and share them with your friends. I also wanted to point out we have more webinars coming up. So the Preservation League is hard at work coming up with online webinars for you to take advantage of. So the next one is on June 1st, and this is a comprehensive webinar about New York State tax credits and commercial tax credits being used in conjunction with one another. So think owner-occupied buildings that also have a rental component, something like that. So be sure and attend that if you want to learn all about how to use those two tax credits together. My next pop-up session will be on June 4th at 10 a.m. And my guest speaker will be Darren Tracy. We'll be talking about energy efficiency and preservation. So I would imagine there'll be some overlap with what we talked about today, because one of the top topics in energy efficiency is windows. So be sure and join us for that. Kurt, if you want to sign on and answer questions, then, as an attendee, feel free. And then we've got a couple more. Coming up June 29th is a webinar all about income producing properties and tax credits. And then coming up July 2nd is my final, for now, pop-up session, and we'll be talking about upper floors reuse in historic downtowns. And we'll be joined by Elise Johnson Schmidt for that. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. Like I said, any further questions, feel free to email us. And have a wonderful rest of your day, and good luck with your home projects. Bye.
Thank you all.